Good evening, everyone. Thank you for that introduction, Jenny. My name, as Jenny said, is Rebecca Fotsch. I have been with NCSBN for almost 6 years now, and one of my specific areas that I do my work in is the Nurse Licensure Compact. So Jenny and I worked on some legislation in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, and I continue now. We have 16 states left to get into the compact, why I'm speaking to you today. And I continue to work on the NLC predominantly, as well as there is a second compact, the APRN compact that is being introduced, some new language introduced in states this session. So I'm also working with my colleague on that compact as well. Let's start our presentation. Just want to wait for my slides to catch up. There we go. So first and foremost, let's just quickly kind of start with the basics. What is the Nurse Licensure Compact? The compact is an agreement, a statutory agreement, so it needs to be a bill that's passed in the legislature and signed by the governor between 2 or more states, and it's for the purpose of remedying a problem that is happening between states without getting the national government involved. So it's a way of states to kind of fix interstate problems. Each state signs on to the same contract, and essentially that contract is the legislation. Because of this, because it's contractual between the states, the bill language that each state enacts has to be substantially the same, because every state has to agree to the same contract, if you will. And that compact, the language, allows for a nurse, that's RNs and LPNs, to have one multi-state license, and that's issued from his or her primary state of residence. The NLC allows a nurse to practice in other compact states, and this is either physically or via telehealth or telephonically, subject to each state's laws without having to get any additional licenses to do that. One of the, I think, good comparisons when thinking about the compact is to parallel it with the driver's license compact. Similar to the way your driver's license operates, you have your driver's license in the state that you reside, so your state of residence, which is typically where you have your voter registration, where you file your taxes, and then you use that driver's license to drive across the country. You don't need to stop when you're entering a new state to let them know you're there. You don't need to do anything special before you drive in another state. The license issued by your state is recognized, and the compact works in much the same way. So just really quick, just for the purposes of this presentation, I'll talk about a few of kind of definitions to help you understand as I move along. So a multi-state license or a compact license is a license that's issued by the home state, and that one license is valid for practice in any of the states that have joined the compact or compact states. A single state license is the traditional form of license, if you will, and that's a license that's issued by a state and is only valid in that state that issued it. A nurse's home state is the state of her primary residence and also the state where she was issued the multi-state license. And then remote states are other NLC states. So any NLC state that is not that nurse's home state, where that's just not that nurse's home state, that she may practice there, but that's remote state to not issue her a license. The PSOR is the nurse's primary state of residence, or again, that home state. And a PTP is a privilege to practice. The privilege to practice is the authority for a multi-state license holder to practice in other states. So when you have a compact license, you're licensed only in one state, but you have this ability, this privilege to practice nursing in the other states in the compact. you aren't licensed in all of those states, you have the privilege to practice in all of those states. Next, I'll do a quick overview of kind of where we are as a country with the compact. So far, 34 states have enacted the compact legislation. 33 states have implemented the NLC. That leaves New Jersey. New Jersey did enact the NLC legislation about 2 years ago now. However, as they were kind of updating their systems and working on implementing the compact, COVID hit, which really threw a wrench into everything. So, so they are planning, the goal is to have that implemented in this summer by June. That's not, not set in stone yet, because again, I mean, as you can imagine, the pandemic has changed workloads a lot. However, that is the hope. So that will be updated on our website if New Jersey is of particular kind of interest to you. When they are, we'll make sure to send a mailing out to those who have signed up on our website for email updates. And that, again, that one state that is partially implemented is New Jersey. And this is kind of important to mention because I think that a lot of states wrestled with the issue during COVID of being able to recruit and get nurses into their state quickly to fill gaps in care from the that states were experiencing from the pandemic. New Jersey was one of those states. I mean, New Jersey and New York were two of the first that were hit the hardest. And New Jersey decided, even though they had not fully implemented the NLC legislation, since they had enacted it and it wasn't their law, they chose to recognize out-of-state licensees to come practice in New Jersey. They just weren't able yet to issue their own multi-state licenses. So if you do have a compact license, you are able to practice in New Jersey under that compact license. The COVID really showed in New Jersey, I mean, I think the country, how vital those compact licenses are, and how much, I don't want to say easier it was to deal with the pandemic. I mean, that's ridiculous, but how it was one tool to address the staffing shortage during the pandemic. There is pending legislation in states, and in fact, I apologize, since I had sent this, I didn't update it. As you can imagine, now January is the beginning of session for most states, so we're seeing filings happening kind of almost every day. But so far, the states in green either have legislation or will have. So Michigan and Pennsylvania will have a filed bill shortly. Ohio already has a filed bill. Vermont already has a filed bill. Massachusetts actually is a little bit different. They are, I think Jenny had mentioned that they are doing a study. The Health Policy Commission, which is an independent commission in Massachusetts that studies healthcare issues, is going to do a study on the compact, kind of the benefits of joining, as well as any possible costs, et cetera. So it's going to be a very independent kind of look and study, and they will be issuing a report this year on that. We do not have a bill yet filed in Illinois, but we do believe that we do intend to have that bill filed. Guam does have a filed bill. They actually have a hearing next week. And then we have seen a filed bill in Oregon and Alaska as well. So I apologize, and after this meeting tomorrow, I can send you an updated map. The map on our website is the most up to date, but as I said, it does change very quickly. So our website, nursecompact.com, is typically the best resource to have the most up to date information.
Rebecca?
Yes.
We have one comment. Rosie
sure.
says that Michigan governor has recently vetoed the bill passed by the legislatures. Have not heard what happens now.
Correct. Correct. The Michigan governor, Governor Whitner, she vetoed both the NLC as well as the, I think it was a psych no, EMT or PT compact. I'm sorry, I apologize. One of the other healthcare compacts. The coalition, has gotten together again now come January, and the governor's office and the kind of the regulatory agency that oversees the Board of Nursing have pledged to kind of work together to get to a point where hopefully everyone can support the bill. So it was very unfortunate. We were very disappointed that the governor did veto that, but we are not without hope, and it's certainly not dead. Well, the bill died last session. Obviously, she vetoed it, but the coalition plans to have a bill filed again over the next couple of weeks and work with the governor's office to address any of her issues.
Thanks.
Okay, and I will move on now. How does it work? So a resident of a compact state is issued a multi-state license that is, sorry, I need to move something out of the way there. And that license is valid, as we said, for practice either physically or telephonically in all the compact states. So that's telehealth, that's nursing over the phone, nursing triage. A lot of insurance companies use nurses for their kind of nurse triage centers, the call-in. Those are covered by the compact, and then of course, as well as physically. In order to be eligible for a multi-state license, a nurse must be a legal resident of the compact state. And as I mentioned before, what is a legal resident of a state? Typically, it's where you hold your driver's license, it's where you are registered to vote, it's where you file your taxes, etc. And then additionally, a nurse needs to meet the uniform licensure requirements for a compact license. This was one of the changes from the original compact. There are a set of 11 licensure requirements, what we'll talk about later on in the presentation, that a nurse must meet before she could be issued a multi-state license. So how is the state of residence defined? A PSOR is the state where you can prove you legally reside. It's a state from which you have your driver's license, voting registration card, or declared for your federal taxes. It does not pertain to where you have a home or where you own property. Of course, there are many people that own property in various states, and you cannot just simply pick the state that you want to be able to apply for a license, a compact license, depending on if you have a home there or if you're renting there, etc. It has to be where you're formally a resident of the state, and you can only have one state of residence. So that's very important too. Sometimes things like this can get complicated. You'll have an applicant that will say, well, I spent 6 months in this state and 6 months in that state, etc. There can only be one PSOR. And all of your legal documentation should be in that state. So next we'll talk about the primary concepts of a multi-state license. A nurse can only can only hold one multi-state license issued by the home state. There have been discussions where a nurse will say, well, my employer wants me to still have a single state in a compact state. They want me to have that additional license, and that is not acceptable under the compact. There can only be one multi-state license that's issued by the home state, because that one license allows you to practice in any of the compact states. Now, of course, non-compact states, you will still need to get that single state license, but for the compact purposes, you only need that one multi-state license. Also important to note, it's not a national license, it's state-based licensure. In fact, the compact, really originated because the states were fearful that if they did not produce some sort of a solution to address the problem of nurses being able to freely travel and freely practice across the country, that the federal government would step in and that there would instead be a federal nurse licensure, which most states are not supportive of. They want to maintain licensure at the state level so that you can have that local discipline and local licensure. A nurse has a multi-state privilege to practice in other compact states, in the remote states. Privilege to practice is different, again, than being licensed in that other state. We'll talk about discipline later, so you'll see that the privilege of practice can still be disciplined in a remote state. But again, the nurse is not licensed in every compact state. She's licensed in one, and she has a privilege of practice in those other compact states or remote states.
Rebecca, we have another question.
Sure.
Ardith is asking, if you already have a single state license in your home state and want to apply for the compact license now, does that mean you are giving up the single state license?
So I'm going to assume for this question that your state is currently a member of the compact, but instead of applying for a multi-state license, you kept your single state, and now you're thinking of moving to and applying for a multi-state license. Is that correct?
She said yes. Okay.
So this is kind of confusing. You're not losing your state license, if you will. Your multi-state license is more of a kind of like a privilege tacked onto your home state license. So you will still have, I'm going to pretend you live in Florida. You'll still have your Florida single state license, but when you apply for the multi-state license, and if you meet all of those licensure requirements, then that single state license turns into a license that carries the privilege to practice in the compact states. So it's not like you're giving up your Florida license and instead then you're getting a compact license. You still have a Florida license, but that Florida license is also a compact license that allows you to practice in the compact states. Okay. And then the licensure model. So most healthcare licensing compacts use the mutual recognition model of licensure. And that's the model that I described when I paralleled the NLC to the driver's license model. There's one healthcare compact that does not follow this model. That's the medical licensure compact, so the compact for physicians. That model is essentially expedited licensure. So physicians do still pay for and have licenses in every one of the compact states. There's just a centralized system to make the process faster to get those licenses. However, the NLC and all the other healthcare compacts have the mutual recognition. And that means that the license is state-based, kind of just how I had described in that question, that you're keeping your state license. But that one state license, since it is a compact license as well, is nationally recognized within the compact states, but then also locally enforced. So if something were to happen and you, a nurse had an action that needed to be disciplined in, that where that action occurred is where that nurse will be disciplined because the compact is locally enforced. Her license could be disciplined as well, but again, we'll get into that a little bit later.
Rebecca, another couple of questions.
Yeah.
One is, what is a national license?
There is none. It's just nationally recognized. So there has been for, I don't know now, probably close to 10 years, there's been this kind of overhanging threat of a national licensure, which would mean the federal government would license nurses. They would be the ones issuing a nursing license versus a state. And then that license would, theoretically, we don't know because this hasn't happened, but theoretically then that license can be used in any of the states. We don't have national licensure. And I don't believe we're going to have that anytime soon because of the compact and because the compact is able to facilitate what that goal of national licensure is, which is that a nurse could freely practice across state boundaries, but while keeping that licensing at the state level and the discipline at the state level, because licensing and discipline of licensing is a state power, and always has been.
Okay. And Amanda has a question. Privilege to practice in other states means that you are covered to practice fully in that state, whether by phone or in person, with regard to no items that are excluded. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, when you say no items are excluded, I guess the one thing to point out is that you still need to follow the practice laws of that state. So, you know, we don't find this often, or I should say very as much as for instance with the APRN licensees, but there are, you know, certain state laws that are different from each other. Or excuse me, the Nurse Practice Acts are different from each other. And there sometimes are certain things that a nurse could do in one state, but she may not be able to do in another. So the nurse, when they're practicing in in that state, so wherever their patient is at that time, they have to follow the laws, the practice laws of where that patient is. I hope that cleared it. I think if that's what they were asking.
Thanks.
Sure. So what is the purpose of the compact? So, you know, of course, you know, boards of nursing are charged with protecting the public. That's why nurses are licensed. That's why nurses are can be disciplined. So the compact's focus is that public protection. And because of the disciplinary structure of the compact, it means that even though a nurse is mobile and able to travel between states and practice between states on one license, because of the disciplinary infrastructure set up by the compact, the public is still protected and through that disciplinary process. It reduces duplicative licensure, which I'm sure this crowd is very happy about. It's very, and I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here, but as you know, it's very expensive. It's very difficult to maintain many licenses, and the compact does eliminate that. The uniform licensure requirements are these set of 11 requirements that are in the compact bill that a nurse must meet before she can be issued a multi-state license. And that uniformity, that standardization is something that we strive for across the country. The more standardized nursing laws are, the easier it is for nurses to practice from state to state. So those ULRs, as we call them, are helpful in that respect. Enhances access to care. In a lot of ways, the compact helps, for instance, case managers as yourself, filling staffing gaps, and then also, and probably more so now than we've seen ever before, is this enabling the telehealth practice. You know, telehealth has been around for a while now, and we know that telehealth can really aid in access to care. But I think now, since COVID, during COVID, so many more people have become so much more comfortable with telehealth that throughout the community, there's a lot of belief that it will just be really expanding monumentally as we kind of emerge out of this, out of COVID as well. And the compact is able to kind of facilitate that telehealth practice, since a nurse can be in one position or one location practicing telehealth in any of the compact states without having to worry about getting more licenses. Nurse mobility, of course, we see the compact being particularly helpful in addressing staffing gaps, particularly with more specialized nurses, ICU nurses. So that we found to be particularly helpful, especially in more rural areas where they struggle to get enough nurses. The compact also facilitates a information sharing and system and cooperation between the states. And I shouldn't even say facilitate, it requires this sharing of information and cooperation. In order for the disciplinary process between states to work efficiently, there needs to be open sharing of any information and, you know, the willingness of the states to cooperate in investigations and adjudications. And that is required under the compact law. And then also decreases redundancy in the regulatory processes. So why would you need more than one license? So speaking to case managers, you know very well why it would be helpful to have more than one license for your specific type of work. That being said, there are some other areas of nursing that I think that maybe wouldn't initially come to mind when you think about a compact license or needing more than one license, but nevertheless are, you know, very important, and every nurse should know that they do need what would you say, they do need the ability to practice sometimes in multiple states, even if they don't realize it. So I already talked about telehealth, and telehealth is not simply you know, talking to someone over a computer screen, which is I think what most people think of when they think of telehealth. Telehealth is also call centers, nurse triage lines, case managers. So, you know, it can really be a lot more, I think, than sometimes people believe. I don't know if you've run into this, but as I've done this across the country, I've heard, do nurses really need practice telehealth? Isn't that just doctors? It's like, no. So I think it's, you know, very important to educate on how nurses are using telehealth and in increasing numbers.
Rebecca, I have one other question.
Oh, yes, sure.
How do you handle professional liability insurance once a multi-state license is obtained? So I mean, the short answer to that is not regulated through the Board of Nursing. So we don't speak to that at all. I mean, typically for a lot of nurses, that's dealt with at the employer level. So I guess I hate to say that, but my answer is that we are not engaged in that. So I can't truly answer that, unfortunately. Thanks.
Disaster recovery assistance. So I think it's very plain to see now how the compact has helped during COVID. Jenny spoke about all of the different licensure waivers that governor's executive orders put in place across the states, and every single state had some sort of licensure waiver for, I take that back. I don't know if Colorado did, but almost every single state had some sort of licensure waiver so that they could bring in nurses as fast as possible. And so I think it's becoming glaringly obvious now to legislators how the compact could assist during a time of disaster. But in addition to that, I mean, I certainly hope that we're not going to be seeing a pandemic like this in my lifetime again. But it's much more than that. We're seeing more and more natural disasters, mass shootings. When that awful shooting happened in Las Vegas, Nevada, the hospital in Las Vegas needed nurses badly from out of state because they just were not prepared to deal with such an influx of gunshot wound victims, and it was very difficult for them. So I know in Nevada, when their bill is filed, they talk about how the compact would have helped them during that mass shooting instance. So it really is, you know, obviously much more than COVID, but it's more than just hurricanes, you know, as well. We're seeing more and more fires. It really just, you know, applies to everything. And when you have one region that's being affected, and you need more nurses, or, you know, filling gaps in nursing care, the compact is able to bring those nurses in to help during that time of disaster immediately. They don't need to wait for a governor's executive order. They don't need to notify the Board of Nursing and maybe get a temp license or anything of that sort. They can practice and help immediately.
Rebecca,
the Department of Defense. Oh, yeah,
sorry,
sure.
One other question or comment. If Mass is not part of the compact and Rhode Island is, I question if my residence in Mass, if I reside in Mass, will I not be able to adopt the compact license for Rhode Island? Do I need to keep my single state license in Mass and Rhode Island?
Yes, unfortunately, that's correct. So if your residency is in Massachusetts, if Massachusetts is not a compact license, then you will continue to need to get single state licenses in all states, including compact states. When Mass becomes an NLC state, then you no longer have to worry about single state licenses for the compact states. Or move across that border, live in Newport, and enjoy the compact benefits. But right now, Rhode Island is not in the compact, so that won't even help you. You'd have to move to New Hampshire or Maine. But yes, you would need to have separate single state licenses in that case. So I'm gonna quickly go through the rest of this list because I know time is kind of speeding by. But military spouse relocation, the Department of Defense is very supportive of the compact because of how often military families have to relocate. And nursing and teaching are the two most common jobs for military spouses. So that is a big priority of the Department of Defense to kind of help those military families. Nursing faculty that's engaged in distance education across states the compact certainly helps them. Access to care for rural populations, health care shortage areas, which you've already talked about. Travel nursing. We know that a lot of hospitals need to use travel nursing at different times to fill staffing shortages, and the compact can facilitate that as well. Home health and hospice, transport nursing, and of course, nurses residing near borders and practicing in adjacent states. It's very helpful for them, whether that's a hospital system that's across two states, whatever that may be. The compact, of course, facilitates that practice. Practice means a lot of things, and most states, though, include these elements in their definition of practice. It's when a nurse utilizes knowledge, education, training, or decision-making skills related to nursing. I think case managers know this more, better than most nurses, since since some of your follow-up work is maybe over the telephone, and you know that when you're doing that follow-up work, that is still nursing care, even if you're not seeing that patient in person. So again, this is kind of the all-encompassing definition that most use as far as what is practice. Oh, there we go. Oh, now I'm probably gonna have to go back. Hold on. There's a lag. I'm sorry. Here we go. Where does practice take place? A nurse has the authority to practice in a state where the patient client is located at the time the nursing service is provided. So practice, what we always say, practice is where the patient is. So even if you're in your home state, the laws that apply to your nursing practice are where the patient is, and you can be disciplined in the state where that patient is as well. This statement is from the Tri-Regular Collaborative, and it just reaffirms that the practice where the patient is kind of the most is a model for consumer protection, and that way, if practice is where the patient is, then if there is harm to that patient from the practice, that patient is going to know to go to their own board of nursing. I mean, theoretically, they wouldn't know necessarily where that nurse is located to go to that other board of nursing to file a complaint. So that's another part of the reason why practice is located where that patient is. So now let's get into the bread and butter. What is needed to obtain a multi-state license? So first and foremost, the nurse needs to meet the home state's qualifications. So whatever your home state currently requires for a single state license, a nurse for a multi-state license needs to meet those qualifications. And this kind of addresses that one of the initial questions about do I need to give up my state license for the compact license? And no, you do not, because you still do need to meet all of those qualifications for that single state license. You graduate from a qualifying education program, and you've passed an English proficiency exam if you're a foreign grad. you have passed the NCLEX exam or a state board test pool exam. That's one of the predecessors to the NCLEX. So if you're a nurse that was licensed prior to the NCLEX, that you can still be included in this. You have no active discipline on a license. You submit to a criminal background check, and that is both state and federal. You're not currently enrolled in an alternative to discipline program. If a nurse is enrolled in an alternative to discipline program, after she has completed that program, then she will be eligible again for a multi-state license. But while she's currently enrolled, that nurse is not eligible. A nurse must self-disclose participation in an alternative program. And the reason it in that way is that some states do not track which nurses necessarily are in alternative programs. So the self-disclosure is a way to kind of capture that participation and eligibility for the compact license. Additionally, the nurse may have no misdemeanors related to the practice of nursing, and that's determined on a case-by-case basis. However, for felonies, the nurse may not have any prior state or federal felony conviction. So this is not case by case. If a nurse has a felony, then he or she is not eligible for a multi-state license. And then lastly, the nurse has a valid social security number. So, as you could tell, as we ran through that list, most states have all of those 11 licensure requirements already. Probably the biggest exception is some states still do not do criminal background checks, and most states do not have that felony prohibition. But aside from that, most states already incorporate those 11 licensure requirements into their single state license. Now, it's important to remind everyone that even if you don't meet those requirements, so let's say you're a nurse who does have a felony on your record, that doesn't mean that you're not eligible for your state's nursing license. That may still be eligible to receive a single state license. That nurse is just not able to get that multi-state privilege attached to that license. How does a nurse in a new NLC state obtain a multi-state license? So let's say that Vermont is able to pass the compact this session. What would you do? How would you obtain a multi-state license? So one thing I would like to add quickly is that when a state does enact the NLC legislation, there is always a kind of transition period so that the state can implement that the compact. There are changes that typically need to be done to a state's IT, to a state's application, things that may seem small but do end up taking some time. So most states need at least 6 months, but it can be up to a year, 18 months in order to get their state ready to start issuing multi-state licenses. So just something to keep in mind. For instance, if Vermont is successful, the day that that bill is enacted does not mean that, boom, all of a sudden you have a compact license. You still need to apply, and the board needs to be able to accept those applications. However, when that time has come, you can go to your Board of Nursing's website and then complete the upgrade or a conversion. It's sometimes called a conversion application to convert your current single state license to a multi-state license. And then typically there's a fee that's associated with that you would need to pay to the Board of Nursing.
Rebecca, just a question because I think it pertains to that. Linda
Sure.
is asking, she said, I have a Maine license and recently moved to New Hampshire. I work from home as a medical consultant for an insurance company that is based in Maine. Do I need to get a compact license to be able to work from home in New Hampshire? Maine does not require CME credits. Would I have to do continuing education to get my compact license?
Okay, so you're living in New Hampshire though, is that correct?
Living in New Hampshire, she said. Yeah.
Okay, so you do need to apply for a New Hampshire multi-state license because that is the state of your residence. So if New Hampshire requires continuing education, then yes, you would have to meet those continuing education for New Hampshire, because you have to meet New Hampshire's licensure requirements before you can then get your compact license. So when, assuming that you've moved relatively recently, when you would have renewed in Maine on that application, they would have asked you, have you changed your residence? Are you still a resident of Maine? So when they do that, then I think it would probably, that at that point, it would have been apparent to you that, oh, shoot, no, I'm not. So I'm going to need a New Hampshire license instead. It doesn't matter where your employer is, it's just where you reside. So I'm sorry that you probably are going to need to do CEs now. That's a bummer.
Thank you.
Nurses.com. Nurses.com, I'm sure, I hope that a lot of you are familiar with. Nurses has a couple different sides. One is the side that is only available to boards of nursing, where they have data that's only kind of available to those governmental regulatory agencies. And then there's also the public side. And with the public side, you're able to search a license to see in what state a nurse is able to practice in. So if you are a single state license holder, so let's say, Jenny, are you a Rhode Island licensee?
Yes, Rhode Island and Mass.
Rhode Island, okay.
Yeah.
So if we would put Jenny's name into nurses, it would pop up that I'm assuming Jenny has no discipline. And
I check all the time to make sure I'm clean.
And that she has the authority to practice in both Rhode Island and Massachusetts, because she has those two single state licenses. Now, if Jenny was a citizen of New Hampshire, if she resided in New Hampshire, when you would put in Jenny's name, it would pop up a map, and the map would show that Jenny is able to practice in New Hampshire, and then all of the other compact states would also be highlighted, because with her one compact state, she could practice in any of those other compact states. So it's a way for both the nurses and the employers to quickly see where a nurse can practice. And it's particularly helpful, I think, it has been in the last couple of years, and it will continue to be, in that, it's hard for a nurse to keep track of which states are now in the compact and which states are not. So this is a tool so that a nurse can tell quickly and definitively which states under her license she's able to practice in. And here is just, again, some more, this is what the screen would look like when you put in the name. So it'll tell you your license type, what the state is, if it's active, whether it's under discipline, whether it's encumbered or unencumbered, etc. And then all the way at the end, it says compact status. And there's where you see it says multi-state. So this, because Idaho is a compact state, this nurse has a multi-state license. So how could nurses become involved in supporting legislation? I know, for the case managers, it's probably a little bit easier because you have this great policy legislative group and a lot of resources. But, kind of in addition to that, I think what we're doing right now is vital, educating stakeholders about the NLC. I will be the first person to admit that the NLC is complex. There's a lot of layers to it. And oftentimes nurses think that they know it, and and in reality, they may not know kind of every aspect of it. So continuing education with it, I think, has been very helpful for a lot of different nursing organizations, as well as employer organizations, hospitals associations, etc. Of course, it's always great to contact your legislator or governor. We have a tool on nursecompact.com. It's called Voter Voice, where you can just put in your zip code and it will automatically generate a letter to be sent via email to your legislator, telling them that you support the NLC. And that's good, but I will say, from somebody that has been involved in legislation for a long time, it is much more impactful if you send a personal email to your legislator, personally, or even better yet, pick up the phone and call them. That just tends to be much more impactful on a legislator. And then it allows you to really give context and be persuasive as to why the NLC could help nurses in your state so much. There are petitions. There's a change.org petition that also can go to your legislator, which can be helpful. You can volunteer to testify when a bill is heard before a committee, and Jenny can certainly give you, much more guidance and information here, but I can certainly say that I've listened to so many committee hearings, and always the most persuasive, impactful speaker is the practicing nurse. They have the stories. They can tell a legislator exactly, or a committee exactly, how this can benefit them, benefit patients, benefit the state. And that is just really vital. So I think that, again, Jenny can speak to this. I think that sometimes talking to a legislator, or the idea of testifying in front of a legislative committee, can be scary to a person who's not accustomed to it. But believe me, you are very likely smarter than every other person in that room, and you are 100% the expert as to what you're talking about. So I really would advise anyone who wants to get involved to do it, because it is incredibly helpful. And then this is another thing that the case managers don't need to worry about, because the case managers are our biggest supporters. But oftentimes we also ask states to have their organization or employers formally endorse the NLC, because that's always helpful too. But we are good in that area. Implementations, as I said, 6 months to 1 year. And it sometimes, unfortunately, is longer, like we've seen in New Jersey. It just kind of depends. There are NLC supporters, across the country, and more than nurses. Of course, nurses are our biggest supporter and what this compact is all about, but it really even extends, past nursing. AARP is a big advocate. As I said, the Department of Defense is a big advocate. Patient safety organizations, telehealth organizations, it's just, rural health associations. It really impacts and helps so many different aspects of the healthcare environment. And then of course, all the different nursing organizations. Case management is of course a big one. Things like camp nurses, oncology nurses, things that you may not necessarily think of when you think of a nurse crossing state lines. It is extremely helpful for these different organizations. And that's really it in a nutshell. Here is my contact information, my name. This email is nursecompact.com, and please don't be fooled by this. That email is checked regularly, many times a day. So don't think that you're sending an email to some void. It is just a easier way for us to have everything kind of organized in one email box. But both myself and the director, Jim Puente, actively check that box. So we urge you to have any follow-up questions, anything at all, to go ahead and email that Nurse Compact email. And then additionally, we do have a toolkit. There are one-pagers in that toolkit, videos, different things to help explain the compact. I mean, I just threw a ton of information at you, but I think that toolkit will help to kind of review what I had said, and also give you some more visuals that could potentially be helpful.
Rebecca, I have 3 other questions.
Sure.
Can you give an example of an alternative program?
Yeah, alternative discipline programs are typically used when a nurse has been adjudicated for a drug violation. So whether that would be diverting medication from the hospital, or just some sort of substance abuse problem. Some states, majority of states, have a alternative discipline program, which would allow that nurse to be in a program where she could get treatment for that addiction problem, instead of just being disciplined and maybe having a license revoked. So while she's in that treatment program, her multi-state privileges are suspended. But if the nurse is able to complete that program, then she's able to have that multi-state license again.
Pat Noonan says, thank you to Rebecca and our friends at NCSBN. for
Hi,
helping
Pat.
to advance the NLC study in Mass. She says, I sent personal emails to 8 legislators in Massachusetts. When is the NLC study expected to be made available
That's
to
what I
Mass
wanted to ask.
legislature?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
believe right now the date, it's either June or July, but I want to say
Yes.
June. However, some inside baseball, there is a lot of support for it at the governor's and Secretary of Health level. So I know that there's been some urging to get this done in the spring instead, so that it can hopefully, hopefully we can file the NLC bill and move that in this next session. So yeah, via the statute, it's June, but I expect it to be sooner.
Mm.
Thanks.
And
Rose, go ahead, Jenny.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I think Governor Baker is extremely supportive of the NLC bill in Mass. So we're feeling extremely hopeful there.
Good. Yes, he is.
Especially because he's really actually added a nurse to the Healthcare Commission. He's done a lot of things in the last couple months that I have been putting in place that looks like he will actually support this bill this year.
Oh, good. Very good.
Rosie is asking, what is the status of the NLC bill in Ohio? I read where the bill passed the Senate in Ohio, then forwarded to its assembly recently.
Yeah, that's a great question. So Ohio, the senator that's sponsoring it, Senator Rogner, she introduced the bill late last session. I want to say like in October, something like that. And Ohio is on a 2-year session. So she introduced it in October when the session was going to be ending at the end of December. She did that intentionally, though. She wanted to get the ball rolling. She wanted the bill to move out of the Senate so that when the new session started, she could refile and move the bill pretty quickly from committee to committee. So even though it had previously passed the Senate, it does start all over now that it's been refiled in January. But I can tell you, it had a committee hearing, today. It had a committee hearing today, and it was successfully passed out of there. And I don't anticipate there being an issue in the Senate. There certainly wasn't last year. So I have my fingers crossed for Ohio. I think that we have good chance in Ohio, good chance in Vermont, good chance in Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, as we talked about. So last year was unfortunate. We were not able to get any bills passed, and COVID really hurt that. There were many states that we were very close, and then because the capitals had to close because of outbreaks, etc., it just didn't happen. So I am optimistic and confident that this year we will see some states, and Ohio and Pennsylvania are big states. I mean, that would be, I think, really good for the compact and hopefully good for all of you.
Rebecca, what's your thoughts about Rhode Island? Because I know the governor's leaving there, so I was trying to figure out if maybe with a new person coming in, if we might have some advantage there.
Well, yeah, and I mean, as far as I know, the governor did support it. She filed a bill with all the compacts, but it didn't move. It didn't really get anywhere. So, I mean, I guess I don't know, Jenny. We no longer have a.
We'll figure it out then.
Yeah, we could talk offline about that. Yeah. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Susan has a couple of questions, and one of them maybe, Jenny, you can answer. She says, is there a way for the compact to do a better updates on legislative processes in the states like Massachusetts? At start of pandemic, it looked like Mass had passed the compact legislation on the website, but when I checked a month later, I learned it had not. Please put a link to the study in Mass if possible. Is there a link anywhere that people can go and look at that study? That's
not yet, but we can actually, Doug, we can add that to the website.
Great.
Because we are going to be updating the NLC this month on the website, so we can actually add in for the last 3 states we're working on. So they'll have the latest on the Rhode Island bill and the Vermont bill in the study in Mass. Okay,
and I have 2 other questions, and then we'll.
Do you think that I could do a quick pitch as far as getting more information? On that website, nursecompact.com, there's a way to sign up for emails, and I'm actually glad to hear this feedback. We are going to be starting a new public email that will be going out to anyone who signs up, that will advertise or give updates on legislation where bills are in states for the NLC and the APR and Compact, as well as what webinars on the NLC are available, just different resources. But the only way that we'll be able to send that to you is if we have your email, through that sign up list. So I would encourage everyone to do that, and we're hoping to have that first email go out sometime in the next month.
Great.
That's great, Rebecca. Thank you.
Susan also asks, doesn't the current state of emergency allow all telehealth in all states without individual state licenses and without a compact license?
There's federal legislation on that, and that is only during COVID. So I think that is important to remember, that is not going to last post COVID, and that's federal legislation. I'm not sure the ins and outs of that, but yes, you're right, there was a bill that addressed that.
Yeah, Rebecca, it's on the CMS website, the telehealth, and and they're only going month by month. I know the board at CMSA monitors that. And with the new person in CMS having just recently left, we're waiting for President Biden to obviously put a new person in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then we'll find out how long the COVID waivers will continue to go, which include telehealth.
And then our last question, Rosie asks, if Michigan governor works through her objections, will the NLC bill need to be reintroduced in legislation? 2021 is a new Michigan legislation session.
Yes, it will need to be reintroduced. And I think right now, before we introduce that, there are some discussions that want to take place so that we can work out these issues before a bill is filed. So I anticipate that happening, but yes, you're right, it will need to be refiled.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank you, Rebecca, for this talk. This has been wonderful. I'd also like to thank NCSBN for their sponsorship and Southern Ohio chapter of CMSA for their cooperation, and Jenny and the committee for putting this all together. And remind everybody to look for that email that should be coming to you with a link to your evaluation. If you don't get it right after this session, you should get an email tomorrow. If not, contact our office. Please check our website for upcoming events and register for them. Thank you and have a good evening.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you, Jen. Thanks, Rebecca. Look forward to working with you this year.
Yes, definitely. Bye, Jenny.
Bye.